Welcome to Grab Your Gear. I am Joe, and want to get right into it. Joining us today is our friend, defense attorney Brad Koffel. Brad has a podcast for the defense, also a program on 610 WTVN Radio in Columbus, Ohio. Brad, how you doing today? Thanks for coming
Doing
on.
well. Always an honor and humbled to be on with your listeners.
Hey, Brad, I want to give you a little background where I'm getting a lot of news and information these days. Then I want to lead into our discussion, but I pretty much follow. I read one newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, um, and then I go three online platforms. The Free Press, which is Barry Weiss, former New York Times editor who left. Racket, Matt Taibbi, and Michael Schellenberger. All three of them were part of Elon Musk's Twitter files. So that's where I really discovered those folks in the beginning. They're what I would call which is a weird, not the traditional liberal in the sense of historical, but the old time liberal that we would know as like old Democrats, people like that. They were the progressives before the progressives went extreme. And all of them, including the Wall Street Journal editorial page, are writing in the sense and giving you a tone that our nation is in a really, really unstable place right now. And I wouldn't call any of those sources overreactors, but I'd like to start there and say, as a student of news and history, are we really at a point in time where this is one of the most unstable, unhinged periods in U.S. history?
Well, let me tell you my background in 30 seconds to give you the foundation of my opinion on that question. And I think it's a question that we seem to ask ourselves every 4 years in a presidential election. I grew up in a very political household. My father was a Goldwater conservative, the original conservative in the mid 60s, very much a GOP establishment. I cut my teeth during the Reagan years. Got a degree at Miami University, one of the public Ivies, in political science and revolutions. I've always had a very keen interest in the confluence between psychology and human behavior and political systems. It's very easy to explain despotism. It's very easy to explain tyranny. That's just brute force and threat of force. When you get into the Enlightenment period and the people became aware or enlightened after the translation of the Bible to English and German and the Gutenberg press, people could communicate through letters and news outlets. The people got enlightened and they decided self-rule was actually the way to go. The problem with self-rule is it eventually has a corrosive effect, and that's what we have now. We have serious corrosion in our machine, and we can talk about that in a little bit later. But to answer your question, have we been here before? Yes, we have. It is my opinion that we've been here 4 times. This is the 5th time we've been at this level of real danger, domestically and foreign. 1860, of course, 1876, which was trying to reunite the nation with the South, and how we pulled our troops out. The North pulled the troops out of the South and turned the keys to governance over to the racist Democrats of the South. 1968, the culmination of the Civil Rights Act, political assassinations, and the Vietnam War dragging the incumbent down in the polls to the point where LBJ bowed out, much like Joe Biden, quote, bowed out. And I would add in there 1776, 1775, where we are starting to see truths that are self-evident, and our list of grievances is growing longer, and we are seeing political usurpers that are in power. We've had 3 families that have been on the top of the presidential ticket since 1976. Bush, Clinton, or Obama. If you go back to 1976, those three families have been fixtures. And of course, those are just three planets, and they've got many satellite moons around them in this in this grid. So we're going to see something dramatic. I don't know that it's going to be as dramatic as 1776. I do think the DNC in 2024 is going to be very much like the DNC in 68. You're going to have a far left that loves Kamala Harris. I'm predicting that Kamala will not survive the DNC, and I do think that the party bosses will they have their person that they're going to further anoint.
The discussion keeps coming up, and it mostly comes, well, now both parties are saying it, that democracy is at stake. The one thing I think we better define, what is democracy that is at stake here? And what is the evidence? As an attorney, this would be, what evidence do you have that democracy is either at stake or is not at stake? And if it is at stake, who's at fault? Both parties? Just one? Where do you see that argument?
Yeah, this isn't. You can't. I would highly encourage people to get away from the news, all news, news media, and go back and listen to historical podcasts. If I may, pimp our show,
Sure.
promote
Pimp
our
away.
show. We try to bring historical references to our listeners on any part of the spectrum. I happen to be a constitutional conservative, but the Marxist ideology, the whole revolution that spread through Europe in the mid 1800s, that Marxist ideology was when tyranny fell and monarchies fell, it creates a leadership void. Karl Marx and Engels promoted the idea that capitalism was the next to last step before communism. And so Marxism is anti religion, it's anti capitalism, it's anti Western values, it's anti democratic norms, it's anti truth. And that has taken, 150 years to reach our shores. It clearly spread all through Europe like wildfire. It jumped the channel to England in the 1920s and 30s. I submit that much of light communism is in vogue in most of Europe. It spread. The end of the Cold War was not the end of light communism. State controlled, centralized group of leadership is what we're experiencing here in the United States. What is really at stake, and to drill down on the answer, we have to look at China. We know very little about China's history. But what we do know is in the 20th century, you had 4,000 years of dynasty was suddenly upended in World War I, 1912. And by 1949, a single party had gained traction and control over a very big figure, that being the Chinese Communist Party, and that big figure being Mao.
No.
And it's centralized leadership. Ask yourself if we have that here in the United States now. Suppression of dissent. Ask yourself if we have that in the United States now. Large scale social engineering. Ask yourself if we've been experiencing that. Purge capitalism, purge traditional elements. We've had profound social and cultural change. We are now seeing strict political control. Joe Biden didn't bow out; he was pushed out, and they're now emphasizing party loyalty. As soon as Kamala got anointed, that party loyalty was on full display. This is CCP, Maoism, Xi Jinping form of governance, and unfortunately, many American corporations and the billionaire class and multimillionaire class kind of look up to the Chinese way of doing business and governing. Apple, Walmart, GM, Nike, Starbucks, Boeing, Intel, McDonald's, Coca Cola all have major too big to fail relationships with China. The people that have those types of ties and nexus to China and those types of people that kind of appreciate their stakeholder capitalism, the Chinese Communist Party form of capitalism, they are the ones that are dropping the hurdles here in the United States, and that's what's happened. We are turning into exactly what I just mentioned is already here in the United States. So that's what's at stake, Joe.
There's three things that I think didn't exist in 1968, which I think make this um, period in time more critical. And that was we didn't have 20 million illegals in the country. We didn't have global terrorism in the way we have now, and we didn't have instant communications. And I think those three elements change the dynamic in this country more than just about any three elements could. And that is the ability to communicate instantly, the ability for those who want to put you in a coffin to communicate instantly, and the ability to literally unleash, for lack of a better term, an army of people that want to kill Americans into our country. And I think that changes the dynamic of any other time in history.
I agree. The invasion at the southern border is that's the invasion we know about. We don't know what we don't know is what other uh, invasions of what we would consider to be very dangerous people that are coming into the United States under student visas, Chinese nationals. They're coming to universities to teach. Chinese nationals who are teaching at our American institutions. You have to have immediate suspicion of anybody that is allowed to leave uh, the Chinese Communist
Yes.
Party to
Yeah.
come and teach
You just
states.
don't leave. You just don't go on vacation. Yeah.
And so not only do we have anti-American foot soldiers that are coming in at the rate of Patton's army in World War II every 30 days, but the more dangerous are the planners, the funders, the people that have the ability to shape influence. Mao's Cultural Revolution. Also, I do believe that unfortunately, we've put Russia, which has historically been a major ally to America, and Vladimir Putin in a position where he's got to now look for a new ally, and that ally is China. So, whoever is running I have theories on who's running our country, and they are running it into the ground, and it is a designed, controlled destruction to get to the point where the people, it's musical chairs, whoever's in power when it actually collapses will most likely have all the apparatus to stay in power for a very, very, very long time.
Everybody I ask, and again, I reference the people I follow for news and information, but the people I ask in the know, almost to a T, say Barack Obama still is in control of the country. And they say it with the fastest response. There's no doubt that Obama still basically, that's why he never left D.C. It was intended. The size of the government grew significantly when he was president, and that was to basically put a middle management bureaucracy in place that could not easily be removed. And that's who I think is running the country. I mean, you agree? Or do you think,
Yeah.
I mean,
So, and I've forced myself um, to really study this and spend some time thinking outside the box. Who is running the nation without going to the cliches of Obama? But East Coast establishment that we've grown used to has been running the United States of America since George Washington. East Coast establishment.
yeah,
You can go back to tobacco and cotton.
yeah,
And number two would be the permanent state that took root after World War II and the intelligence defense network that
yes.
sprouted from there. And number three, uh, thanks to three major Supreme Court decisions that uh, we have a major donor class. And let me tell you real quick, this is so important for your listeners to understand. Supreme Court, no one reads Supreme Court decisions but lawyers and professors. Law students barely try to avoid reading these things. Let me tell you about three decisions. Uh, in the 1976, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that said that bribing politicians is free speech, i.e., political donations is a
Yep.
form of free speech. Used to be bribery. And then in 76, the Supreme Court, in a pure per curiam decision, which means not one justice wrote the decision, said, no, if you give 10,000, 100,000, $1 million to a candidate, that's free speech. That's problem one. Number two, 2 years later, in 1978, uh, a decision was written that said that corporations are persons and they do, in fact, have the same individual rights as we, the people. Big problem. That decision was authored by a big tobacco lawyer named Justice Powell Jr. And before Justice Powell was Justice Powell, he was the leading lawyer for big tobacco. Big tobacco, as we know, in the 60s and 70s was coming under fire, no pun intended, for being cancer and a killer. And then the third major Supreme Court decision is much more closer in time, which is the Citizens United decision. And that gave super PACs the ability to raise millions of dollars and spend millions of dollars and never reveal the identities of their contributors. So we have America Incorporated versus We the People. Then you throw in Barack Obama's Chicago style politics.
Uh-huh.
Think about this. How many American presidents stayed inside the Beltway after they retired from
One.
office? Barack Obama still lives in D.C. You ever ask yourself why? Just so his girls can go to stay in school there? No, the man never left office. Even Reagan went to Bel Air. George Washington went to his family home in Mount Vernon. Half of America still has no idea what's going on, Joe.
The other, I want to transition to something else that I never thought I'd see in America. And that, look, there's always been protests, there's always been flag burning. But what happened at Union Station yesterday while Benjamin Netanyahu was delivering his address to Congress, and for those who don't know, reports up to 10,000 protesters were outside of Union Station as the rail station, historic rail station in D.C. Pro-Palestinian confrontation against police. There were backup police brought in, I believe, from New York. They vandalized the monuments in front of Union Station with pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas graffiti, and then took down the American flag and raised the Palestinian flag above, right above Union Square. Having done some documentaries on Middle Eastern terror groups, that is a very symbolic thing. That's just not raising a flag. That is conquering your opponent when you raise your flag like that. Um, do you have the same kind of reaction that it wasn't just a protest and vandalism, but that we are in a war within, and that we have become? Uh, See, the thing is, I think we've become desensitized a little bit because there's a group called Queers for Palestine. They have no. Do they understand what the Palestinians would do to them in Gaza?
Well, great point. That's the paradox of the hypocrites on the left. As we know from the most revolutions, the guillotine eventually is rolled right up your driveway. It's just a matter of time. The Constitution is not a suicide pact. As a constitutional conservative, as a libertarian, as a free thinker, I really struggle with the notion that burning the flag is a form of free speech, but yelling fire in a movie theater is not. I believe that yelling fire in a movie theater causes less reaction out of people than burning the American flag in front of God fearing Americans. So I do take issue with that being a form of free speech. So the Constitution is not a suicide pact. What we had at Union Station was a Bolshevik revolution, and no different than when the Bolsheviks raised their flag and then renamed their city Leningrad. Uh, they will eventually, when they start tearing down statues, oh, they've done that. When they start whitewashing history, oh, they've done that. And when they start raising flags to their new movement, then that is an act of war, in my opinion. Unfortunately, uh, that's how revolutions start. That is a step. That is not just free speech. That is a revolutionary act. In 1918, Congress passed anti-American activity or seditious activity. If you are advocating for the forceful overthrow of a government, that is a federal crime. That law is still on the books, and these folks are getting dangerously close to the enforcement of that federal law that
But
I don't know
who,
last time
who
it's been
who's going to
revoked.
enforce that law, though?
Well, eventually they will try to do that as that fantastic song, that country song that came out last year. Try that. What is it? Try that, and that doesn't work in my small town.
Oh,
Try that
yeah.
in my small town. But that's a Bolshevik form of revolution. And this, in with cell phones and 24-hour news, Joe, we are getting real-time updates of how our nation is coming under the influence of Bolsheviks, Marxists, critical theorists, single state central planning, social engineer, communists, whatever you want to call it, Stalin style politics.
It's
It's
cultural Marxism. Just it all is in one bucket.
but it is, but its culture is upstream from politics. So now it is in our political system. When Netanyahu spoke in Congress yesterday, 7 or 8 United States senators, all Democrat, left. 80 congressmen, Democrats, left. Our vice president, who presides over the Senate and who presides over joint sessions of Congress, decided it was more important to go to Indiana for some reason to talk to 56 people than be there for Benjamin Netanyahu. This is no longer just a cultural revolution. This is a political revolution. It's in slow motion, but for those of us that are paying attention, feels like it's going very quickly.
So, in our last few minutes we have here, I want to tell you something that I am observing. See, I disagree with you. I think Kamala's in. I think we're going to watch between now and Labor Day a Hollywood production called The Kamala Show. That's what I'm going to call it. Designed to make us forget her record and to shorten the amount of time so she didn't have to go through a primary. There hasn't been the months and months of you know background checks, speeches, the corrections, the things that happen in a normal political year, and that is time. At the very least, it's a year-long process of primaries and speeches and screw ups and background and investigative reporting and all that. She avoids all of that. So you shorten the amount of time you have to reintroduce her to a generation of people. There's a whole generation that don't accept depth that are based on emotion. I think we have a generation of emotional people who can be persuaded easily. And I think by shortening that period, it allows her to capture power. I think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to watch this show. It's going to be celebrity endorsement coming out of the you know what. And I think if they feel she's slipping, I just think they're going to try harder because the one thing I am sure of, these people who are behind this are not going out quietly, are never going to go out, are not going to give up power. And my friend Senator George Lang of Ohio made a speech that he had to retract, and he said if Trump doesn't win, there's going to be a civil war. Um, there's a lot of people that think that, Brad.
Yeah, I do disagree with your assessment that Kamala Harris is going to remain at the top of the ticket. And let me further
So okay, so
elaborate.
that's a dinner at our favorite steakhouse then on the line
You're
there.
very good. Okay, so here we go. Popular vote is not relevant. The Democrats have always loved the popular vote. They've never liked the Electoral College because the EC allows GOP to continue to put presidents in the White House. It is a race to 270. It's a race to 270. Uh, Hollywood, the Joseph Goebbels form of propaganda is not they're doing this for a period, I believe, of 2 weeks to see if they can increase her poll numbers. If her poll numbers don't get better, and she's showing a sign of the honeymoon being over, then there are one, two, or three people who will rise during the convention. We will have our first televised brokered convention. There will be anarchy in the streets of Chicago in 24, just like there was in 68 when Kamala gets pushed aside. Who will it be? Don't know. Um, but it's keep an eye on which people that she would ask to be her VP that say no. A guy like Bashir out of Kentucky, a guy like Joe Manchin, who can come back to the Democratic Party, someone even like Michelle Obama. Um, but the I do believe that this is a race to 270. The quants, the wonks, the political scientists are going to figure out how they can get their candidate to 270. Kamala will not be able to sustain the big donors. They're already losing the big donors. She's going to get moved aside Chicago style, just like they did to Joe Biden. And yes, I agree with you that right now we do have a Joseph Goebbels style propaganda to get the German speaking people on board with the Nazi regime, which was distort history, specifically her accomplishments. They will infiltrate the black and marginalized parts of society. They will stereotype and fearmonger Donald Trump and the GOP that we want to resurrect that there's a resurrection of the Aryan nation or an Aryan nation here in the United States. But the biggest thing that they're going to push, that Goebbels pushed on the German people, is there's a moral duty to protect your nation by eliminating the Donald Trump threat. The moral duty. That's what you're going to hear. And that's exactly the playbook out of Goebbels.
There's a lot of people that would say that's already been enforced, which led to an assassination attempt.
Correct?
I mean, do you really believe that was just a crazy 20-year-old? I'm
That was
not
a
being,
setup.
yeah. I mean, uh, the problem is we have the Kennedy assassination, right? And we
Mhm.
have the Zapruder film, and then we have, 60 years of evidence debated. What happened to Trump was like about 250 Zapruder films with everybody taking cell phone footage. And every time you look at an event or a situation, it completely becomes less believable that something wasn't on purpose. I mean, am I?
No,
Do you see a logical person could come to that conclusion?
yeah. We all know, and I think, Joe, you and I have talked privately that Donald Trump is an assassination target. That if you think of political power as of Russian nesting dolls, and each one fits on top of the other, you try stealing 16, that failed. You tried two impeachments, that failed. You stole 20, bankrupt him in civil judgments, felony prosecutions. The guy still rises up. He dodges a bullet like Matrix, and he's rises up like a zombie. And like, what do we need to do? An assassination attempt on Donald Trump was as foreseeable as a thunderstorm on a hot and humid day in August here in Ohio. It was exceptionally foreseeable and equally exceptionally reckless protection detail. They aren't done. They are not done. And this is not a game, folks. We are way past conspiracy theories. We need to have a very serious discussion. Why are they trying so hard to keep him out of the White House and to keep the new GOP? Because they have their own plan. Whoever wins in 24 will rule through should have power through 32. A lot's going to happen in the world between now and 2032. And I can tell you one thing beyond the shadow of a doubt. If the left gets in the White House, they will reshape the Supreme Court, in which we will be permanently stuck with their Marxist, a Marxist single party central planning state. This is the most significant election in the United States history.
For everybody listening to our program, all those people that get up every morning and go to work, make sure you're registered. Make sure you vote. This program and this platform is for you. Brad, thanks
Can I
for
say one
joining
more
us.
thing?
Yes,
Can
go
I say,
ahead.
all right,
Yep.
thanks. I have 4 kids that live outside the house. I've got they're in 4 different states, going to college or out of college. We have picked a city that is reachable within 4 hours for all of us. In the event or when there's a total grid failure and there's no self-service, there's no banking, my kids they're going to have X amount of cash. They all have a car, and we are all agreeing to meet on at a particular hotel on a particular city. For us, it's Nashville, and it's a hotel in Nashville. If shit goes down, my kids know where to meet, and they have cash to do it. I recommend that. Number 2, if you like or don't like what I'm saying, our show, if I may promote
Yes.
our show,
Yes, you can.
your show.
Absolutely.
You can find us on Spotify and Apple iTunes. It's For the Defense, which is for the defense of the American people. If you just Google, you can just put my name in, Brad Koffel, Koffel, in Spotify or Apple iTunes. You'll find the show.
Thanks, Brad. And we need more conversation. We're probably going to have to talk more as we get towards the election. You're going to have to be more regular here on Grab Your Gear. Like I say, people who get up and work, people that don't have time to just follow news and the cable channels or whatever, we have to become a place where they get news and information. And it's funny you talked about your plan. We launch a show next month called On the Edge, which has a lot to do with how to prepare, what you can do in the event of an emergency. And having done a number of projects on the grid, that is one of the most vulnerable things we have in our country, and that is the power grid. So if
And
anything may happen,
stay with God. Stay with God.
That's right. Brad, thanks a lot for your time. We are going to chat with you again more regularly as we head towards the election. And again, Brad Koffel, 610 WTVN Radio in Columbus, Ohio. And also, as he said, his podcast is For the Defense of America with Brad Koffel, Koffell. Check out Brad. Check out Grab Your Gear. Everybody, we appreciate you joining us this week. We will catch you next week with another edition of Grab Your Gear Extended here with Joe. In the meantime, you have a great day. Have a great weekend. And if something breaks or something you need to know happens, we're there for you. More programming being launched in the next few days. Watch our platforms. Watch our website for more information. In the meantime, you have a great day. For Grab Your Gear, for the team here, we'll see you next time.